That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and I'm joined today by Dr. Randall Bock, Randy to me and his friends, and maybe to his patients too. I don't know. Do you eschew the whole doctor thing and say, "Hey, man, call me Randy"?
No, I'm a doctor guy. I'm Dr. Bock. I think people if they want to go see their friend, they go see their friend.
How do you feel about being a real doctor? Because most of my life is spent online, and I often have these interactions with a lot of doctors. But every time I ask them to check my prostate, they say, "No, I'm of the literature kind of doctor. I have a PhD."
Yeah.
So yeah, what's it like being real? Yeah, what's it like being a real doctor?
Well, it's a funny thing, I have to say that nobody else is going to be listening to this, right?
No.
So just between you and me, I've seen so many sets of things that people want to see naked at various times over the years. It's transactional. You are helping somebody and you're dealing with that thing. I've done lots of exams on men and women and so forth, and it's just kind of like you have to put on a different persona, a different hat. And I suppose car mechanics don't have the same kind of instance because cars, maybe for some people, maybe cars are sexy. I know a couple of guys that will kind of lose it over a Porsche Carrera or something like that. But I don't personally have that issue. But you're the car mechanic. You're the bartender, I guess, on some level. You're somebody there to listen and counter, interact. And if you're inappropriate, A, it's inappropriate, and B, you don't really last long in that profession. It's kind of goony.
Yeah, with being a doctor and seeing terrible things, especially on people, did that have any impact on like your physical attraction? Like I would wonder, like say I would imagine like if someone were a gynecologist, like a straight guy who was a gynecologist, where every day he was seeing vaginas and some of the most atrocious. I'm not doing a good job of describing it. He must see some terrible things, and I wonder if that would affect his attraction to women because he's seeing like terrible.
Well, you gotta put the guy in gynecologist.
Alpha male, the alpha in the gyno.
Well, it's a funny thing, there are actually fewer guy gynecologists these days. It's an issue that this is to not answer your question right off the bat. Probably about 30 years ago, there was kind of this push to get women gynecologists on the concept that women wanted to see women for that women's problem. Mm. And I think in some cultures perhaps, but oddly enough, a lot of my women staff, they would tell me that they started to have to see a women gynecologist. They couldn't find their male gynecologist anymore, and this is kind of speaks to the first point. They found that, and again, this is not every single person, but I've heard this a number of times, that the women gynecologists were chattier. That you're in this kind of position, you're in stirrups and whatnot, your knees up in the air, and the women would be like chatting recipes or vacations or whatever while they're doing the exam, and would take far longer, and then kind of tilt around the sheet and converse with you and make eye contact. It's like, and one, my staff in particular, I don't know why I was being told this story. She was telling everyone maybe, but it's like, didn't want to do that. Because I guess in the context was that I would always have a chaperone when I did a GYN exam. So I never did them alone.
Always a threesome with
so
Randy.
There's always somebody there because I'm a guy. And but to that point, I would just, do what I had to do. If you get a pap smear or something like that, there's a way to do it. And you can, you have to be kind of slow and gentle, to kind of make everything not painful, whatever. But I was good at that. And then it's like, boom, no pun intended, but in and out. And then you've done the job. And she's like, wow, that is like, you did the pap smear under 5 minutes or whatever. And I wish that were the case with me. And I think that's how the conversation generated. I didn't ask about any of this stuff. And I was like, well, what's going on? And so she said, and then somebody else was listening to the conversation, and somebody else in my staff said the same thing. It's like, there's a big changeover. I'm not sure that's universal, obviously. But there is, I think that men were sort of unfairly, in a sense, kind of not quite removed, but disfavored from that profession. So I think it's rarer to have men go into OBGYN in general. But that's not to say their expertise wasn't valued. Again, that's not something guys really have to kind of deal with to that same extent. We don't menstruate. We don't have the same issues. As far as seeing, the original question, as far as seeing gross things and then not wanting to, engage sexually, I don't think that's how things operate. I mean, intimacy is intimate, and what you're doing there is something, it's more functional and transactional. And maybe there is functional transactional sex. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have Las Vegas, perhaps. But that's not a me thing. So when you happen to have
like a bird, a bird outside your an eagle?
Oh, I do actually. I mean, I have there's somebody squawking out there. I don't know. Can we do bird ID?
Everyone out there, let us know what bird you hear.
Is that a crow? I don't know. That's a squawking kind of thing. We actually get screech owls, and when dusk happens, I see the bats going around. It's just a suburb, but we got.
My apologies for interrupting.
That's fine. There used to be this band, Bird Calls the Mesozoic. Did you ever hear of them? They were a Boston band. Interesting. I like the name. I'm not sure they had genuine birds back then, if they were just dinosaurs. And the Mesozoic. So I might have to call them up and tell them their name was an oxymoron. I'm sure they would love to hear from me.
On the attraction front, I was with I was at both births of my sons. So our first son, I was manning my wife's right leg, and then for our second son, I was manning the left leg. And I got, I was maybe not the best seats in the house because I was a little off to the side of the stage, but I saw everything that happened. I was also, something that, women will probably know if they've ever given birth is like, it's actually a good thing if you poop during it, because that means that you're using the muscles, in order to push the baby out. So, I was there in that very intimate circumstance for the past, 3 or 4 years. I've, changed some terrible diapers and all that. And at no point has my attraction for my wife waned. If anything, it's actually like, I think I've gotten a lot more horny for my wife, even having been through, sometimes the literal shit with her, So I could see how, even a guy, has to suit up in a hazmat suit every now and then, to handle some patients.
It's a funny thing. I remember, I witnessed births in medical school, and assisted here and there. It didn't become my profession, but it's far more compact than people think. The baby comes out and he's all kind of like bunched up, and the head is elongated. It's not extraordinary when you actually see it happen. Obviously, some of them turn into Shaquille O'Neal down the road, but not at the very beginning. I
think that bird is giving birth right now. That's what it seems like. Which is weird because birds lay eggs. Yeah.
I don't know. They do a lot of. Somebody had a cartoon. He has his headphones. He can figure out what dogs mean. So he sees all these dogs in the neighborhood, and they're all barking. This one barking at that one. And he put he has a dog decoder. And he finally figured out. He's got his little thing. And it's like, and the dogs are like, hey, hey, hey. And the other dogs are going, hey, hey, hey. So he spent all this time, decoding, and so they're all just like, hey, hey, and that's probably what the bird's doing, like, hey, hey.
There I am. I want to give I want to plug a great sketch from Saturday Night Live back in the 80s. Mel Gibson hosted the episode, and the sketch is we're in a doctor's office and it's filled with women, and they're all trying, they either have an appointment with their gynecologist or they're trying to schedule an appointment with a gynecologist. And who's their gynecologist but Mel Gibson? So he comes out, looking like gorgeous Mel Gibson from the 80s. And, he's like, sorry, ladies, I'm all booked up, but my my partner, secondary doctor is here, and it's John Lovitz. And no woman wants to go and have John Lovitz do an exam on him. It was a really good sketch.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that movie. He did that movie. What do women think, or something? What do women want?
What women want? Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was quite. I thought he carried off comedy quite well.
Really fun. Yeah, I think he's a incredibly talented guy. It's funny you bring that up because, I think most people, when they think of Mel Gibson, they probably think of like Braveheart or a lot of the dramas, or his, offstage dramas, rantings and all that. Yeah. But there he was, like doing, that was a rom-com, the guy could really do anything. Oh, and then of course, obviously the Passion of the Christ, so I'm always amazed by like the range that the greats have, like I would, what's his name? Like Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington does a ton of dramas, but there's an interview, a conversation that he has with Jamie Foxx from some years back, where it's about like a half-hour conversation. It's the two of them, just bullshitting and telling stories. And he's so fucking funny, Denzel Washington, where I'm like, please do a comedy, because you're just, because he can really do whatever the hell he wants. He's just so good. And Jamie Foxx is, I have such I'm in awe by
that guy's
Jamie Foxx.
Yeah,
he's unreal.
Yeah, he's got so much talent. He can sing and all that kind of stuff. I saw Denzel Washington in this little, one of these little Instagram reels just today, as a matter of fact. And I think there's Oliver Stone, and then it's a round table, and he's going, I was like, don't make this like, acting so hard. I was I don't forget what he was, dishwasher, where you had to get 8 hours of work into 3. I was a postal worker where you had to get 3 hours of work into 8. And then you're all, you're doing all this work stuff. It's like, don't tell me you're on a movie stage. You got people bringing you food. Don't tell me it's so hard.
Mm-hmm. But I think that, that kind of self-deprecating, I feel like Denzel needs to be pulled aside and like, no, it might not be hard for you because you are Denzel Washington, but you can't take any schmo and put him in front of a camera.
His point was, he said, look, we have talented people around this table who can do this. So you should be feeling blessed that you can do this. He was acknowledging the talent part, but he says a lot of, don't make as if it's like, oh my God, I slaved away in my. Yeah. So
it is incredible kind of with celebrity to the, the stature that actors are given, looked up to, especially if an actor happens to share your politics. It's like, oh, so-and-so, I agree with them. Great. Fantastic.
Unfortunately, none of them do. None of them share mine.
Yeah.
Well, the ones that do are former actors. I mean, or they're actors not working. Like I'm kind of a James Wood, his ex.com account. Have you seen his James Wood's tweets?
Oh yeah, I was watching his stuff before. Didn't he get kicked off at one point? I forget what he got kicked off about.
Probably.
Yeah. James Woods, another great actor. I wonder. Yeah, and what was his really great movie, True Believer, from back in, I think it was in the early '90s, where he plays a lawyer. I believe he has a ponytail, which really helped the character. But yeah, great actor. I don't know if this episode could easily be a rundown of all the people that we follow on X and talking about them. Well, one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because I had a number of things that I'm just interested in. As a doctor, you've saved lives, right? Like do you keep a tally of how many lives you saved, either in an emergency situation or like long term? Like, Man, this patient, he would have been dead 10 years ago if it wasn't for this guy.
No, I think you and I exchanged a story about one when I was young in West Virginia.
Yeah.
That guy did save, and he almost took my life as a result. Just for context, I don't want to do the whole story, but there was a guy kind of dropped off. I was the only doctor within like 5-10 miles in a rural place in West Virginia. And I was young, and he had been stabbed in the chest, and I doubted myself. They doubted me, and I sussed it out that it was a cardiac tamponade, and I fixed him. But in his world, he was lying there basically dead, flatlined as far as the EKG. In his world, he awoke to being in the bar fight, and I'm a guy with a sharp object standing over him. So, he just was in total kind of stage continuum, and he attacked me. And fortunately, there were 3 or 4 people around the table, and they pulled him back. But and I had a sharp object. I had his blood, whatever. So he didn't kill me. I saved him. That's the only one that I can really chalk up as an actual, like, had I not been there and on my toes and with, adequate, smarts at the moment, that I saved. But, other times, it happens. I got to tell you, the one that happens a lot, it's not really saving somebody's life. It's kind of like getting them a little better than they would be. I see a lot of fainting. You've probably seen this over the years, hot day or hot restaurant or whatever. And a lot of times it's the busboy or whatever, somebody in the back end of the restaurant, and boom, he's down. Everyone's like kind of horrified. This has happened probably 5-7 times with me, sometimes at parties and this and that. But the hot restaurant scene has happened 3 times. I've been in a restaurant where somebody drops. And again, I think the back rooms are so sweltering. And so the person drops, and everybody wants to kind of pick them up and, slap their cheeks and give them the glass of water. And I'm like, no, clear back. You get out of the way. And I put their legs up and their head down, their legs up, because they basically lost blood to the brain, at least temporarily, as a faint. And the idea of fainting is a self-correction. It's like all of a sudden you're getting blood back into the brain. And that works. That's universal. That's good advice. Everyone kind of knows the Heimlich maneuver and all that kind of stuff. But I tell you, I've used the Heimlich maneuver maybe once in my life, but this thing I've used like easily 6, maybe 7 times of getting the person down, getting their legs up. And almost always, even doctors are doing the opposite. And it just kind of makes it kind of mind blown. And so if you do that, you ever go back to that restaurant, it's like you eat for free for a while. So
you put your legs up on the table, and they feed you like that.
Yeah. So that the last time it happened was a Brazilian waitress at a local place, and every time I come in, she's like, fawns over me. She only gave me that one free meal, but it's like, oh, there he is. It's kind of like you get not quite celebrity, but a little bit of happiness quotient over that. But as far as other people's lives, it's statistical, because I did a narcotic detox as part of my practice. I had a regular medical practice for about 30 years in Revere, Massachusetts, and in the 2000s, Suboxone came out, and it's buprenorphine is the trade name, which rhymes with morphine. So it's a narcotic in and of itself, a little bit like methadone, but lighter. And the idea is, my idea was to taper people using that and get people off. But as far as saving people, sometimes you don't know, because, did you save their lives? I can say that the things I've done, probably, saving things are on the margins. Sometimes it's a little bit of going against the trend. I'll give you one quick example. When I was doing the Suboxone treatment, a lot of people were on methadone, and they'd come to me because I was tapering. So I did like this gradual 4-month taper. And I think it's pretty obvious, because it kind of takes the time. 4 months is like the time you get over, losing your dog, losing your wife, grief, bad relationships. So, and you're kind of better in 4 months. So 4 months was giving people enough time to get from addiction to, sobriety, without being, like Goldilocks, the great philosopher, it was not too short, not too long, it wasn't forever, it wasn't years, and it wasn't 3, 5, 7 days of detox where people bounce back. But the cases I think where I can say I've really made a difference were a lot of the pregnant women who would come to me because they wanted their babies to be born not addicted. There's a kind of a muling. If you've ever been on the ward when there's a methadone baby coming out or heroin baby, they are going through withdrawal, and it's difficult to watch for the doctors. I think it's difficult to watch for the moms, and there's a fair amount of guilt. And if they can't necessarily breastfeed if they're on methadone as well, because they're going to be, redosing the baby, or they can and not worry about whatever. So a lot of people had heard of me because, again, I had a little bit of fame or notoriety in that sphere as the guy who would taper you. But there was pushback from the methadone clinics. They just don't want to do it. They're like, well, if we take them off methadone, they might go on heroin, so forth, and that'll be a bad thing. It's like, well, I get it, but here's somebody with a reason, with an impetus. You're pregnant, and you're bringing life to life, and there's never going to be probably a greater reason to want to get sober. And so I had dozens of women come to me, and I tapered them, and they didn't go back on heroin for that duration, and they gave birth, and the babies came out as normal as can be. You can't vouch for every illness and so forth, but as far as the methadone and the heroin, all that stuff, they came out sober, and the moms were sober too, and they could breastfeed at that moment. So that's not, life-changing per se. I mean, that's not life-saving, but I think it's life-changing, and it's bringing, life, the lifeiest, the most lively it can be. And I think that, there's a fair amount of shying away from that. It's a deep topic, but it's called harm reduction. That's what the methadone clinics do. They are, quote unquote, reducing harm, but it's medicalizing, addiction, medicalizing problems, and kind of keeping you in the womb, not the womb, but I guess bad use of term, but keeping you close, kind of, like zoologically, so that you don't venture out and do something bad. But on the other hand, you don't venture out and do something good either. And that's somewhat of the trial of life in general. There's philosophy for you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. When it comes to, stuff like, heroin and morphine and addiction, are you able to quantify just like how addictive those drugs are compared to other drugs? Like, is it, can somebody, be, quote, chipping? Is chipping possible with, with heroin, or does it ultimately lead into like, full blown addiction? Can you do heroin once? Can you snort it and then be,
Yeah, I think people do that. Historically, people have done that. I think it's a little bit like Velcro. There's two sides of Velcro. Velcro doesn't work by itself. You can't just take that Velcro and stick it to something. And neither side of those things. So I think there has to be kind of some stickiness. The great philosopher William Burroughs, the beat poet, the guy who got away with killing his wife.
Yeah.
Point blank range. Supposedly, it wasn't Kiss and Tell, it was William Tell.
In Mexico, right? Was it?
I don't know. No, I think it was in New York. But he was the scion of the Burroughs typewriter fortune. So he was a wealthy boy, grew up in the Midwest, I think St. Louis or something like that, and got whatever he wanted and so forth. But then I imagine he had a fight with his wife and just shot her because he was a massive drug and alcohol user and kind of a difficult man. And then he said they were playing the game of William Tell, that he was supposed to shoot the apple off her head. No witnesses. Great story. And he got off, probably in multiple senses of the word, he got off on that.
Yeah.
He did not serve, I don't think he served jail time, and he shot her point blank. Maybe he produced an apple or something like that. But he called, and he had his many flings with heroin addiction, as did a lot of the quote unquote beat poets and beat generation and the beatniks. And he said, I think quite wisely, that heroin usage is a disease, and maybe all the addictions are diseases of exposure. And to that point, if you're a Mormon and there's no exposure to alcohol, there's no exposure to heroin. I mean, Mormons have very, very low rate of narcotic addiction. Very, very low. They have zero caffeine addiction, zero, cigarette nicotine addiction, probably very little alcohol, and so forth, alcohol and whatnot. And so in the context, I mean, it's hard to be an alcoholic in Saudi Arabia. It's hard to be, a heroin addict, in say Mesoamerica, 1,000 years ago. There's no heroin. You need that thing. You need both sides of the Velcro. You need the match and the striker in order to make the flame. And I think that the ultimate question comes down to is, what you make out of it and how responsible you think you are for that issue. If that's not too diffuse a statement.
Yeah. No. I hear what you're saying with with William S. Burroughs. When I was in high school, I think I may have read Naked Lunch in high school, and I don't remember it. I don't remember ever particularly liking Burroughs's fiction or his writing, but he was cool, right? There was something, he was cool, and I don't know if it's like it's probably my junior or early senior year, and I was doing interviews for colleges, and I went to a woman who was she had graduated from Brown, and I had applied to Brown, like some of my writing and stuff to read. And I described myself as William S. Burroughs minus the heroin, which I think for a 16, 17-year-old kid, I think that's a pretty cool way to describe it. And I ended up I actually got into Brown. I'm sure there was some other things going on.
I didn't get into Brown.
So look at that.
I applied to this MD, this BAMD or BSMD program. It was an all-in-oneer. So you have 6 years, you get your bachelor's and a medical degree. So it was very, that was the only piece of Brown. That was a very hot ticket. So you'd save 2 years of tuition money. It's kind of the European model. They just you exit high school, and then 6 years you have your medical degree. And they don't really have 4 years of college and then 4 years of medical school. So we kind of have 2 years wasted along the way. We're getting the liberal arts stuff. It doesn't kind of delays your doctorhood. So that was the piece of Brown that I applied to. I didn't get into that, so I had to settle for Yale. But I didn't apply to regular.
I decided to settle for Yale. I love that. I did not get into Yale. I did not get into Harvard. Well, it's interesting. Like recently with the the ruling regarding like affirmative action. And, something that I've had to contend with is, even though I was a really good student, really good academically, I think I was third in my graduating class, and my SATs weren't that great. They were like 1360.
Oh, that's really good.
But when I got into Brown, I got into Cornell, and I went to NYU, and now all these years later, I'm like, I wonder if the Hispanic thing, I wonder how many points that gave me. Like, in perhaps a fairer world, maybe I'm nowhere near that. Maybe I would have to settle for like a Queens College or something. And
that's where Jerry Seinfeld went, and I think Larry David too. I think it's like the college stuff. It fades over time. It's like who you are and what you do. If they look at the CEOs around the country, I don't think there's any real weight. As far as CEOs, maybe in lawyers, yes, but CEOs, then there's a real weight to the Ivy League and so forth. A lot of the guys who succeed in business are those who have leadership skills, and so they might have been the captain of the volleyball team, or the one leadership type thing or another. And a lot of things fade, but I technically, I guess, went to school with a lot of smart people, medical school and college and high school and whatnot. And, at the end of the day, it comes down to things you do and how you react to the world. And, whether you want to, even if you're not an alpha male, and I don't think I am per se, whether you can become a sigma male, which is to follow your muse and follow the stories where they lead. And to use a bad word, a wrong word, regardless of how people think or what people might think of you. And so it's really the pathway. And I think you're a great success. I love your book. I was just reading parts of it again today. You write with skill and verve. I was reading your Apu chapter.
Thank you.
And you're one of those people who can do his whole name. Is that right?
Not right now.
Sorry.
After a few takes, I could do.
My kids can do it.
Yeah,
they're total Simpsonologists. Matter of fact, my oldest son is he has these koans. He's got these little, every we could be at a party or dinner or whatever, and he's like, "That's the Simpsons," and he's got a clip for almost every bit of it. The Simpsons have done everything.
Is he the animator?
No, that's the collateralized debt obligation analyst. He's going for CFA right now. He's in the banking world.
Wow,
He's actually also in the podcast world. This is my son Sam. He's got two podcasts that they don't do often enough. He and his buddy from college have these really great world takes. One is called the Sinopsis, it's China, so it's SINO, like Sino relations, Sinopsis. And the other one is the Pravdcast, like Pravda podcast on Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine war. And he and his friend Michael Williamson, they do a bang-up job. They're funny together and knowledgeable. And I agree with them. I don't want to give them the kiss of death, but I agree with them like 88% of the time. I used to be 87. I moved up to 88. But they just don't do enough episodes because their stuff is really good, and they don't really care about promoting it and so forth. But
I'll definitely put a link to it when we post this for sure.
Yeah. So
that must feel great, like as a father, to actually to be able to look at at least one of your sons and say like, oh wow, I really enjoy the stuff that you're doing.
I look at both of them that way. My younger son's Eli. He's very creative.
Eli's the one I've worked with Eli before.
Yeah. No, he's very super talented guy. And he's actually, I'll do a plug. He's working on this screenplay called, I guess, Liquidity.
Should you be given the
idea?
No,
maybe it's Fluidity or Liquidity, Fluidity. I'm probably getting it wrong. Sorry, Eli.
One has to do with business. One has to do with sexuality.
Well, I know, but it's a pun. But in either case, it's a kind of a gender fluid protagonist, and all his forays in failing in both realms of dating. And so it's a cartoon series. He's got a bunch of episodes, and he's going to kill me for not getting the name right. But maybe I confused it with Liquidity. Maybe it's Fluidity. Anyway, we'll come up with that adequately.
Well, Eli, if you're casting, I know a guy who does voices. I could do voices.
You do voice?
I do. I could do voices.
Yeah. Well, he's got some feelers out. Maybe I'll have him connect with you. So his buddy Ian Nelson, who was I think in Teen Wolf or something like that. They met at USC. They went to I know Eli went to USC Film School of Cinematic Arts, and Ian I think went to the liberal arts part, and they met there. They've been friends ever since. So they work on these projects. But he's peripatetic right now. He's traveling country to country, spends a month in digital nomad, basically. So he's in Dublin right now. And he might have to spend 2 months there because it's Dublin.
I get that was enough. If no one caught that, the birds outside Randy's window caught that pun.
But he's been in like Brussels and Madrid and Barcelona, all of those places.
So I have an upcoming episode with a guy named Jesse Burkhart, and it came from just a little back and forth on Twitter, where Jesse had posted a picture of his son, very cute boy, and the son looked very sad, and part of the copy was something along the lines of, my son dropped his ice cream, and I refused to get him another ice cream. Like, this is a lesson that the son will learn. And I responded with something like, the biological father should buy him another ice cream. Just like a little dig. But to Jesse's credit, like we kind of went back and forth. And I think he has like a philosophy of he's not going to help his kids like with, I guess, money, like when they get older. So anyway, long story short, we're going to have, it's not going to be a debate, but later this month, we're going to have a conversation about what it means to, having to properly raise a child where they're an adult and that sort of thing. And we're having we're trying to figure out the terms of a bet where we will, put money aside into into a pot where, say, like 20 or 30 years down the line, if his son turns out to be like a really great guy, he will get this money, So we're trying to figure that out.
That's an interesting point. I got to tell you, if you're up for an anecdote, I'll tell you.
Sure, of course. My
travails, my trials and tribulations and so forth regarding that very point. Does he have boys also, by the way?
I believe so. I don't know how many children he has. I think he has one boy.
Okay, so this is an interesting point. The question is, do you help? Back in the playground days, my boys might climb something, up a fence or whatever, and my wife or somebody in the playground be like, "Oh, you got to go get him." I'm like, "No, he climbed up the fence. He's got to climb down. Otherwise, he's never going to know how high he shouldn't be climbing up the fence." Now, if it were like we're 90 feet up, yeah, I get it. I mean, I would rescue him from the Empire State Building, that kind of thing. But in this context, so you have to kind of like get them to do this stuff. Anyway, so we had, each of my sons, when they graduated college, were kind of expecting to incubate for a while at home at different points. Eli at a kind of slightly later point, like a year or so after college, but Sam graduated college, and they're both to a certain extent gamers. They play the various games. I think he was doing Warcraft or some World of Warcraft back then, and so he was actually literally where I'm right this second, and working on these games. Like, what's going on? What about hunting for jobs? All that kind of stuff. It's like, well, I figured I would take a kind of a break first, and then look for jobs. Like, life doesn't have breaks. That was a college thing, right? Now, anyway, we went through this whole discussion, and I couldn't quite motivate him. And at a certain point, I thought to myself, he's living rent free, like in my mind, as the expression goes, and living rent free in my house. And so I came up. I said, what? It's $1,000 a month to be here. And he was an economics major, and he came back with a counter proposal. He said, look, he showed me, he worked on all the electric bills. He showed me the marginal amounts for his being there based on food and this and that, car insurance, whatever. It came out to like, $300 a month extra that I have if he's there versus not being there. And I said, okay, that's really great, but F you very much, because that's not how it works. You're not counting the amount of grief and pain it hurts me to see you sit there and waste your degree, so forth. That's like a couple $1,000s worth. So I'm giving you a bargain. For me to watch you waste away is a much higher expense to me. And so I started charging him $1,000 a month, and he didn't speak to me for like 5 months. And he begrudgingly, he had to go. He got a temporary job, and traipsed out of here. We were in the bathroom or whatever, passing by like ships in the night kind of thing, or ignore whatever. I wasn't there, and I it wasn't a happy moment for me, but I didn't in a sense I didn't care, because I had something else at play. First of all, I was reveling in my $1,000. It's just the incredible amount of
bathing in that. Yeah.
Like with that Duck McScrooge or something.
Scrooge McDuck. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And so it's like, I purposely put it into quarters, so I have more of it, nickels and whatever flying around. Anyway, but a few months later, he starts to have, people he likes at work. They like him. He's getting promoted. He's a smart guy. He's getting promoted and this and that. And after a while, he has to tell somebody. That joke about the guy on the desert island with
Bridget Bardot. Yeah, Bridget Bardot. I think it was Bridget Bardot.
Bridget Bardot, that joke? And
yeah, it's a great joke.
He has nobody to talk to. He eventually gives her a black wig and mustache, and gives her one of his shirts and says, "Your name's George, and talk to me in a deep voice." And she's like, "Oh my God, this guy's so weird." Whatever, he's fetishist, homosexual, whatever. And it's like, and finally he says, they drink some of the coconut brew beer, and he says, who I'm screwing? Anyway. So eventually he had to talk to me, because he's like having so many things happen at work, and it's like exciting in a different way from World of Warcraft. And you're muted, by the way.
I had to let it cough out.
Yeah. So so that kind of passed. And with Eli, it was the same thing. The odd thing is, Sam started to he built a career out of this, that he wound up at a bank first, and for whatever reason, but now, he's moved up the ladder, and he gets good, all this kind of stuff. It's all worked out for him. I don't know how it'll all work out 20 years from now, but for right now, it's been really good. It's a decade of this. And And the fact he didn't speak to me for 5 or 6 months, like, I don't really care. It's like baking a cake. You just sit, you wait, you have the right ingredients. You have to kind of trust the process, as it were. And to quote the 76ers guy, Daryl Morey, whatever. Anyway, but with Eli, I'll give you one interjection. Like a few years after this, 2 or 3 years after, he's talking with his friend. I'll call him Phil, and he's on the phone with Phil. And Phil, another bright guy, but living at home, and he's a barista kind of thing, or working at Trader Joe's or whatever restaurant or something. And he's like, Phil, so I got to ask you a question, silly question, but is your dad charging you rent? I overheard him downstairs, and he's like, no, that's, I know. Listen. I know it sounds stupid. Yeah. No, you don't want to pay rent. I got it. But this is the deal. If you're not paying rent, you don't have any like stimulus. It's like the sand and the oyster. You need that thing to start growing and making the whatever. And I'm like, well, my work here is done. But it wasn't, because Eli had the same issue, and he didn't speak to me for an entire year. But it's, I think things work out. It's kind of like this independence aspect. And a lot of the guys I know who've had this issue, they have the extra home, they have a home in the Cape or whatever. And they give the kid the home in, on Nantucket or something like that. And then they wonder that he's, smoking dope all the time. So that's my story, such as it is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And me, having like 2 young boys, and thinking ahead. Basically thinking anytime they're doing something, it's like, am I fucking up as a father? am I doing the right thing? And one thing I could say, like my parents, my dad is from Argentina, never graduated high school. He was kicked out of high school, and came to this country not speaking English. He was a butcher. He took over a butcher shop, and turned it into an incredibly successful business, and bought properties and stuff in Manhattan, like up in the Spanish Harlem area, and renting out apartments. And my mother, she graduated high school, never went to college. She went to beauty school. So both my parents didn't graduate college, and my dad, when we were growing up, he would tell me that my job, the job of his son was to do well in school. And it so happens that I was very good academically. So it's kind of like the job that I had wasn't very hard at all. So like my dad wasn't the one saying like, you got to go get a job. Like even when I was in college, it was all about, you have an academic scholarship, your job is to do well in school. And there wasn't much guidance as far as like, hey, you should maybe pick this major or this concentration. So I think without that, it's like with that, incredible safety net of my dad, allowing me to kind of do what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. It put me in a position where, not saying like, oh, I would be in a much better place now, but I could see how things would have been a lot better if I had, perhaps had a different major in school, if I had like a side gig or two, if I was hustling or had to hustle in order to, survive, so it's something like with our, with my kids, like my wife and I have already talked about, like, when they're older, like, the expectation is like, no, like you will be expected to, have some form of employment or, side business or something that you're going to be doing, because I understand firsthand, like just how, they say what idle hands are the devil's plaything, but sometimes the devil is just it's just boring, and it's just like, you're not even doing, you're not even accomplishing what you could possibly, all the incredible things that you could be doing, if you just have some direction, I think you froze, Randy. Uh-oh. Randy just left me. Randy was so disgusted by my story that he left me. I expect that he'll be coming back anytime now. There you go. You froze. I thought it was something I said. I thought it was like, man, I just bored the shit out of you, and you're like, oh,
my
so
computer just
disgusting.
went black. The whole thing. I got to get a new computer. It's about 3-4 years old. It decided to go black. It's charged up and everything. It just went, just disappeared, black.
Well, I don't know what the last thing you heard me say.
Yeah, no, you were talking about your dad, and then but shocking language.
Yeah, my parent, like I would say, because my dad said, like, my job is basically my education and to do well in school. It didn't offer the best guidance as far as, what I should study and what other things I could take on top of that I think would have been beneficial. So I think I was in some ways a victim of privilege. I was very privileged to have such supportive parents that, I didn't necessarily start to get my shit together until, past the age when my friends were, getting their shit together. So love my parents, I'm very grateful for them, very lucky and fortunate to still have their support and their love. But, for my own kids, I think it's, it's important to learn from.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
We gave them the opportunity to find themselves, as it were. And Eli always, he did cartoons like from, age, whatever, 2 or whatever. And he was always really good. He made everyone laugh. And, he was always having stories and they were unraveling. Like one of my favorite things when he was really little, he was talking about something. He could do a story just endlessly. And and sometimes I'd be like tired, whatever. And he'd like grab my head and focus me, like he'd look right at me while I'm talking. And so we knew he was a storyteller and he's a cartoonist, and he just always loved, float into animation, whatnot. Anyway, it's funny. It's been a kind of a tough artist life financially for him. He doesn't do as well kind of financially as my older son. And he's like, Dad, why didn't you tell me to become a stockbroker, become X, Y, or Z? Why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you say, put the pen down and, learn engineering? Like, yeah, it's just, it's kind of funny. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. It's like, why didn't you? And it's been the other way around. Like my resentment, not to my dad, but my mom was like, wow, you kind of like made me become a doctor. It's like, no, I didn't. You wanted to become a doctor. I said, yeah. I mean, one day I said I want to be a fireman. You're like, One day, the next day I said I want to be a space, astronaut. Yeah, huh? And I want to be this. When I said doctor, she's like, every day thereafter, she's like, well, you said you were going to be a doctor. she didn't literally tell me to be that, and then she'd introduce me like, Randy, he's going to be a doctor, Like I had this thing where it had one of my digits severed in an accident, and it had been put back on, kind of remarkably and miraculously, considering the date back then, and it was done very well and unnoticeable. And and I was very grateful for that. But she said, remember that was the moment you wanted to become a doctor, and you owe it to like people to help people that same way. So again. But then, when I actually hit medical school, I was like, oh my God, this is like so much. And this is not, I mean, I would have, I was kind of more naturally inclined towards math and science and physics and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, why didn't I could have been a computer guy. I could have been, running Oracle by now, whatever. But it's one of those things. I mean, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's like, there's no right answer. The real thing about parenting is, the thing I remember is obviously, we have our DNA, which is a bunch of molecules and whatnot strung together. But our real DNA is storytelling. What we really have is the caring and the love and the attention. And the thing I remember, about my folks is they were there. I'm sure they didn't have 100% of fun 100% of the time with 100% of us, doing 100% of our actions. But they put up with us, and they fed us and they carried on and yelled at us. And, what people want, they don't want glory. They want fairness and attention. And so if you're fair with your kids and you deal with things as they come up and you deal with them, eye to eye, face to face, and as, sensible, sensate, cognitive beings, who deserve your respect and time, and you show an interest, that's love. That is pretty much love. Your dog knows it. I don't know about your dog, but my dog knows it, and I haven't given any career advice, so it's like,
if you turn that dog into a doctor, that boy is a story to tell and to see.
Well, it happens like a Family Guy and stuff like that. They're able to do it. Stewie is very bright. Is that his name?
Yeah,
No, that's the kid.
baby, right?
No, the dog is
Bri-
somebody else.
Is it Brian, the dog?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but what you're going to do is you're going to be there for your kids, and your kids going to have their own, vagaries. They're going to have their own arc. But I think you have an interesting point, which is like, how much of a lead do you give them? How much leash, and how much things will you tolerate, and how much do you need to be on track? And I think that's kind of the problem. Hard times bring soft men, kind of, that circular arc we have. And a lot of the stuff that I have accomplished, I think, is, my dad was a lawyer. My mom grew up pretty well, but they impoverished themselves to put us through private school, like from 7th grade to 12th grade. And so before college. And so we grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment. Technically, it's like a 1 bed with a kitchenette we converted. And 3 of us, 3 sons lived in that little tiny room. We had bunk beds and, on the floor. And so my kind of childhood existence, we didn't have stuff. We didn't travel. I never went to Europe. I didn't do any of that stuff. We didn't have vacations, homes and all that, So it's kind of like I had that hunger. I think kids need to have a sense of hunger in order to want to go out and do the stuff. Otherwise, you wind up kind of, dissipated. Not RFK is in the news right now, RFK Jr., but a lot of a lot of the Kennedys, they wound up dissipative. They participate by dissipating. They take the fortune and they, snowboard to hell on it, and they drink themselves to oblivion and whatnot. I think you need a little bit of downer. And I'm not saying, his dad's assassination was a great thing, but I think, sometimes the reality, the harshness of life is what gives you impetus to produce and use.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that I've battled for quite a few years is sort of this self-imposed guilt that, like, here I am being able to work in, like, entertainment and get up and do comedy and produce videos and stuff. And, like, my dad spent, God, his whole life from since he was like 7 or 8 years old working, like, whether it was selling bottles of seltzer, like on a horse-drawn carriage in the city of Tucumán in Argentina, to working in a butcher shop, 6 days a week, and I say it's self-imposed because at no point has my father ever been like, how hard I worked, et cetera. It's never been any of that. It was always, this duty, this responsibility that he took upon himself. It was, there are a lot of people who, you have that responsibility, who don't answer the call. And at no point has he ever been like, I can't believe you decided to do this or go this route or like that. It's been all of, supportive and like, and that sort of thing. So there is like kind of like a little bit of a guilt factor that I've had to like try to get over, because it's like, I'm not going to help myself by having this self-imposed guilt. It's like I'm creating my own, I'm creating a mess for myself by having that, like waking up like, oh man, like, my dad worked so hard. I'm going to do a stand-up show for 5 people tonight, and so yeah. So I'm to prep everybody. I am looking forward to my conversation with Jesse Burkhart, because I think especially nowadays where people are having more conversations about fatherhood and masculinity and what it means to be a man and all that. I'm happy to take part in the conversation even this way.
Well, I think you're doing it. I think I think you have the genesis. The genesis has gene in it. You have the seed of generation. I mean, I think my kids don't have kids yet, and I think that I can't wait. I would like to see them be dads, and understand the not the sacrifice, but really the gift. So I would imagine your dad's hugely proud of you, and bringing boys to life, and staying married and working hard. I think that's all we ever have as expectation. The actual number of things that one does, those fly by, and we have our own gradations and measurements. I think you're bringing up an interesting point, though, which is kind of, in a sense, kind of the Godhead, the way we measure ourselves, the need to keep holding ourselves to a standard. My father died in 1979, and I was in medical school at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, and but I had him for my formative years, and I still have him. He showed up in one of my dreams just a couple of days ago. I have a Tesla now, and he was getting the Tesla. He's like, looking for the shift, and it was kind of funny. I was explaining this stuff. So there's no shift in the car. It's like, but the end of the day, it's like I'm not working for him, but there are parts of him that live on in me and of my mom as well. That you are going to kind of grade and shade the world around you by doing, and it is by doing. I think men need to do. It's not enough to cogitate. You need to activate. But I think you have the genesis of that. You have the seeds and the beginnings of it, and you have a career, and you're a really hilarious guy. And if that doesn't work out, you can always do seltzer or something.
Take it all the way back, and somehow find a way to exploit my dad's child labor.
I tell you, if you did have to sell seltzer, and I worry about that at various points. Like would I drive a taxi? At various points, I've had my standards questioned. And I would rather drive a cab than go back on my visions and my the way I want to see things and do things. And so in the Soviet, people did have to drive a cab or do something menial because they wouldn't be compromised. Solzhenitsyn put up with the gulags because he wouldn't back down from his work. He had to stand by it. Hopefully we never all get there, but there is dignity in selling seltzer, and God knows if you did have to sell seltzer, I bet you would have a great spin on it. You would have those bottles flying off the shelf.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm waiting to hear back about a gig. We'll see if that gig doesn't go through. I could very well be in the seltzer in the seltzer game. One thing I wanted to talk to you about. My wife and I over the last week went to a friend's wedding in Santa Barbara, which was just beyond excellent. It was incredible. Santa Barbara, just as a place, is unbelievable. The food's incredible. I don't think I had a bad drink. I don't drink that much, but I realized in Santa Barbara, I'm like, I like to drink. Like I'm like a teetotaler for most of the year, I guess. But man, when it comes time to drink, I was drinking Palomas that just downing them, left and right. It was so good. And when I was there, my friends, my age, he's 42, so it's an older wedding. Everyone there's in their 40s. And the one night at the rehearsal dinner, a lot of people got up and were able to say a few words and all that. And one of the things that I said was, I was like, my friend, he's always had this very, I don't know if it's necessarily childlike, but let's say like a youthful thing about him, where when you're hanging out with him, you feel younger. You don't feel like you're in your 40s. You feel like you're back in your 20s. And then I said, looking around, like, man, what a reminder that I'm fucking old. Like having to go to the bathroom in the mirror and looking in the mirror, it's like, holy shit. I might feel, thank you. I'm glad that you're here and making me feel younger, but fuck, I'm old. And the next day, one of our buddies came over and he's like, yo, Lou, you ever think about doing the Propecia, short for Propecia, about, there? And I was just like laughing, just because online, especially, one of the go-tos from all of my critics, the people who don't like me, is they make fun of my hairline. And I find it so funny because it's like, I don't care. I don't think about it. The two I took like my two favorite bald men in my life are one, my dad, who if I grow up and I look like my dad, I'm totally fine with that. I love the way my dad looks. And the other one is George Carlin. So I'm like, okay, if I look like Carlin, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But it made me think like, oh, there are people who, a lot of guys who are on Propecia, and a number of the guys that, at the wedding are on it. And then I looked up the side effects of Propecia, possible side effects. And one of them is that, your dick doesn't get hard. And if I had to choose between having a fucking ponytail and my dick getting hard, call me gay, but I'm going with my dick. I love my dick so much.
Well, it's an interesting point. So I've prescribed this stuff at times, and I'm actually going to interview a physician, I believe. He said yes, and we'll see how it goes. Who did a little bit of a prospective study on low dose Propecia as far as like avoiding prostate. So it has two things. It's going to grow your hair, and it grows it naturally, unlike Rogaine. It's just going to grow actual real hair. So I'm a little bit of a proponent, but it depends on person to person. Obviously if it changes libido, that's not a great thing. I don't think it changes your erection per se. I think it changes your desire to have one, if it does that. So it's a libido, not erection. But if that's a rare side effect, I mean, most all the guys, a huge preponderance, 95% of the men I've put on Propecia don't have that problem. And mind you, if you can save a little money if you get the finasteride and chop it down. Finasteride comes in 5 milligrams. It's the same thing that's Proscar used for prostate. I don't know if that's an issue, whether the price is an issue, but it does work and it grows the hair fully. And there are other ways of doing it down the road if you change your mind. There's just hair transplants and all kinds of stuff that's actually quite good. But the question I had is whether you have the secondary benefit of having a lower chance of having prostate issues, because that pretty much men universally get prostatic growth. They call it BPH, benign prostatic hypertrophy, over time, which somewhat cuts down the urinary stream. It's like so even now, like we're getting back to my sons, if my wife's walking by and she doesn't know which one's in the bathroom, she can tell by the stream. Like their urinary stream is like, and mine is not. Anyway, so there's that to ponder. But you can certainly leave it alone. And man's looks, I don't. I was just looking at my what's it called, the medicine cabinet above the sink, and if I was just doing a mental tally of what percentage of that stuff belongs to me, like 0. I got a toothbrush and a couple things, maybe 5 or 10% of all the items there, and so I don't care about my looks as much as my wife, I think, cares about her and her skin care and this care, that hair. They've got like 1,000 things for everything. I can't fathom it. But such is life. So, but I do care, and I care about getting my clothes on and combing my hair and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important, some aspects of it, but in the microcosm, one thing or another, I think most of your power and your force is going to be from your personality and how you approach the day, and whether in fact you're funny or not.
Right on. You guys heard it here first. The prescription is be funny, from Dr. Randy Bock. I've spoken with Randy a number of times on his podcast, which I will link to. It's always a great conversation. Randy had hit me up a couple of days ago and asked, like, oh, what do you want to talk about? And I didn't get him any topics ahead of time. But I figured that he's a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I really enjoyed this episode, and I hope all you guys did too. And Randy, I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Thank you. I haven't gotten the gift yet in the mail, but I'm going to keep my eyes open for it.
It's attached to that bird that's been circling your house.